Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Thank you so much for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today I'm going to explore the summer solstice, one of the most important events of the whole year from an astrological viewpoint. Why is that? What can we expect? How long will its influence last? And exactly when does it occur in the nearest big city to where you're located? If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. This is very much a community, so if you have any thoughts, please do share them. I do try to interact with each comment, but please do like or share the video, and I'd be honoured if you'd subscribe. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you'd like to get your free written daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, please see the link beneath this video. Remember, I provide an overarching analysis of that day's event, the most potent influence, and then each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. Totally free. Please see beneath for more. Now, when this event occurs, we're ushering in what's known as Cardinal Quadrant 2. What does this mean? Western tropical astrology is based on the fixed seasons. Now, the distractors of astrology will always say, well, look, where the zodiac first began, the stars have moved with the precession of the equinoxes, and therefore astrology must be wrong. Well, Western tropical astrology doesn't work like that. That's Vedic astrology. So the summer solstice is the second of the big quarters of the year. So the journey begins with the spring equinox, and the zodiac means, in simple terms, the precession of the animals. So it begins with the ram in Aries, and that's the ignition point. That's where we find that charge to start that journey, to take risks, to be enterprising and daring. Once we get to Taurus, we're trying to think about how we can sustain our early beginnings, and that means finding some foundations, digging down a bit, earth. It also means about creating a little bit of stability. But then when the sun makes its way into the sign of Gemini, we wanted to interact, experience each other, discuss things, think about things. But that's a very speedy sign. So when we get to Cardinal Quadrant 2, because the year is divided into 4 sections of 13 weeks, the sun returns to Cancer. And after that buzzy Gemini time, the Cancer energy that's ushered in is asking us to take a breath. It's to think about our immediate environment. It's to think about our sense of security, about our emotional needs, about how we interact with people who are immediately around us. It's also, of course, about our families, but about security both in an emotional but also physical way. In other words, where we live. So for the next 4 weeks, that is going to be somewhat of a preoccupation for us. But then the sun is going to make its way into the sign of Leo, which of course is very charismatic, outgoing, and it's where we can really showcase our desires to really achieve all that's really lovely about life. But if we're very creative as the sun goes through the sign of Leo, and we come up with some great ideas, if they're just ideas, they will wither on the vine. So the energy of Virgo comes along and says, look, we need to be disciplined to make sure that whatever we've propagated in those first 5 journeys through each of those zodiac signs, we need to shape it into something that's more tangible, more workable, more structured, and has precision. And that is the sign of Virgo. So that brings us through to the autumnal equinox and the beginning of Cardinal Quadrant 3, which begins with all about relationships. So that's the background to where we are. So where does it occur in your particular locality? Well, in terms of Greenwich and universal time, it occurs on the 21st of June at 2:58 p.m. But on the screen now you can see that it is on the 21st in every major city apart from Sydney, and it's on the 22nd. Now, in terms of the technical reality, Western tropical astrology is a Mediterranean construct. And so obviously the detractors of astrology will say it can't work because people who live down south, well, it's their winter solstice, and of course it is. But in the north, this is when the Earth's axis is tilted at its closest point from the sun. This means in the northern hemisphere the sun is at its highest point in the sky. We get the longest day and the shortest night. But of course down south it's the converse. It's the winter solstice. But remember, Western tropical astrology is predicated on Mediterranean time. So it's a time to pause with the sun's precession into the sign of Cancer to reflect, take stock, to consolidate. But as that event exactly occurs, where are the other planets distributed around the wheel, and how will they be impacting on our experience over the next 13 weeks of the time of this quadrant? Well, first up, we obviously have to look at the sun. So I'm sharing on the screen now the solar chart based on the first point of the zodiac, the ascendant at 0 degrees Aries. And therefore that puts the sun on the cusp of house 4. So the first thing we need to look at is what influences the sun directly. And it's quite clear that that is Neptune. Now Neptune's very late in Pisces and the sun is very early in Cancer. So although they're mutually receptive in terms of both being located in water signs, they're actually in a square, all but about 2.5 degrees. So that's pretty close. So one of the things that Neptune on that point of this event is going to do is really inflame our potential to download a lot of sensitive energy over the next 13 weeks. So I feel that that's something that we're going to collectively experience. But it could also seem that the world itself seems very unsteady, not very clear, a lot of challenging events and information that makes it difficult to really know where we stand. So we could experience a sense of disorientation. Now the thing we need to look at then is, what is the ruler, the planet that rules the sign of Cancer? And of course the answer is the moon. So where is the moon? Well, the moon is in Leo, which is grand and proud and dignified and demands a degree of respect. But look at the relationship between the moon and Saturn. Now Saturn's the planet of hard love, and it's in the 12th house, and it's in a retrograde in Pisces, and it's pushing us all to embrace the emotional and spiritual dimension after what has been a very extended period of being quite caught up with the material world as Pluto made its first pass through the sign of Capricorn, which lasted 15 years up until March the 23rd this year. Of course, it's just inched back literally into the sign of Capricorn, but I feel that Saturn's asking us to really take our feelings much more seriously. So that's applying to the position of the moon in a difficult way. So although the moon's quite sociable in the sign of Leo, and perhaps with the moon in Cancer that may, especially with Venus and Mars being in the sign of Leo as well, it might kid us into thinking, look, we need to have people around, let's entertain. After the rather starvation period of social interaction of COVID, this is a great opportunity to spoil those we really care about. And that's fine, and we can do that. We just need to be aware that some hidden issues through Saturn could affect that moon. So psychological stuff, perhaps history that's not been properly processed, discussed in a family or a more lively situation, could rear its head in quite a challenging way. Now the other big aspect I want you to be aware of for the next 13 weeks is the nodes. The node is obviously getting closer as it reverses in the sign of Taurus to enter in the sign of Aries on the 17th of July as the true node. But you can see that because Pluto is so late in the sign of Capricorn, and the node is so early in the sign of Taurus, and the south node on the other side of the heavens in Scorpio, we have a T-square. Now, what's the commonality here? Well, you can see that the south node is in house 8, very Scorpionic, the node in Taurus in house 2, and the position of Pluto is in the part of the overall zodiac, very much to do with big business, big corporations, big government. But Pluto in retrograde is in some ways seeing huge changes around all those areas. And the node, of course, is our collective direction of travel, but it's also the karmic outcome. So I think because the 10th house can be about property, and the 2nd and 8th houses can be about inflows and outflows of money, I feel over the next 3 months, particularly with the sun being in the 4th house of the more inner part of where we live or how we live, the emotional dimension of our financial situation is going to continue to be quite a challenge for many of us. So in other words, there's a big reset going on around resources. That's an absolute given. Now, because Venus and Mars are in Leo, there can be some opportunities to be playful, to be flirty and have fun over the next 13 weeks. So what does the sun in Cancer tell us? Listen to how it feels. One of the things that frustrates me with astrology and the things you read, especially in more popular publications, is the sign of Cancer is very much about nurture, protectiveness, can be defensiveness, obviously loves the environment in terms of peace and tranquility. However, the sign of Cancer is cardinal. It's a leader sign, and it does like to be in charge. So one of the things we need to do to make sure that we feel in charge of our lives, however sparkling some of the social opportunities are, or if we're drawn towards someone romantically, what the sun in Cancer is asking us to do is ask ourselves, how does this feel? That's vital. And also Pluto, it's in that T-square with those nodes. It's also in a quincunx with the sun. So it's pretty much on the cusp of the sign of Aquarius, which is the collective, and the sign of Cancer is more introverted, more inward looking influence. So we still need to be aware of how collectively the world is changing at a huge pace, but how will that feel? So security, I feel at this time, could be challenged by Neptune's square to the sun because things seem hazy, confusing, misleading. Pluto's saying there are fundamental structural changes going on whether we like them or not, especially around technology. How we earn or gain money is being affected by the nodes or our sense of self-worth or values. And because the moon is challenged by Saturn, however playful or upbeat things seem, we need to be aware of what's going on at a deeper level out of sight, at a more subterranean level. So do expect more revelations to be coming into the open. I know I've been saying this for a while, but every time I read something online, there's some more corruption, the more cheating that's come into the open. This is a time when we're all being asked to get much more in touch with what's really clean and pure, whether it's around our rivers, lakes and seas or our own inner world. We've become so caught up in, basically reading the stuff that services our agenda in some kind of way. So we all need to keep our minds very, very open and to try to purify ourselves. And that's the journey we're going to go through over the next 13 weeks.